Now is a hacking workshop going on across the hall, and Lan did it the last 2 weeks. He might do it next week. She said it'll depend on how much interest there is, so I'll put it on my page and let you know if we're going to do it again next week. All right, and anyway, aside from that, this is instant response, and we're up to chapter 6 and 7 down here, the scope of the incident and live data collection, the first part of that. So I should have that ready to go. Yeah, here we are. All right, so let me just make this there. All right, so the first thing you have to do, of course, is establish the scope of the incident, because you have to decide how big is the problem. Is it spreading? This is like containing the fire. Maybe viruses are spreading, attackers are spreading through your network, so you want to get some early data and quickly decide how big the problem is. So your initial data, you have some kind of original alert that started it all, like somebody had a pop-up from their antivirus on their workstation or something like that happened. You may notice more than the original person analyzing it. Look at the other detection systems. Remember, your network administrators probably don't think like investigators or instant response people. They know how to fix systems, but they aren't necessarily trained for instant response, usually not. So determine what sources might help. Find sources you can actually use. You got to find sources that quickly give you answers that you can use right away. Complicated sources like image this hard drive and spend a week analyzing it, that's not appropriate at this point. That would come later. So if you find malware, then look for things it does directly, like it probably might create files or registry keys. There might be indirect artifacts. The prefetch folder records the last 128 programs that were executed on the machine. So even if the malware doesn't create a file, it will be in that list as something that's been recently launched. The browser history, things like that, network artifacts like firewall logs, these are all various traces that it'll leave behind. This is why one of the lessons in the first class of the forensic class I teach is if you want to do something on a computer and then you want to deny that you did it, you're in big trouble, because it leaves a lot of trails of everything you do. Unless you essentially physically destroy it after using it, it's very hard to not leave traces. There are traces all over the place, and not intentionally. It's just the functionality of it. It does involve making a lot of changes, everything you do. Those are artifacts. So the firewall logs, for example, don't depend on registry keys. It's good to have independent sources. So you aren't just believing one fact, you find backing up facts from an independent source. And it's very difficult for an attacker to clean all the sources. They might delete the logs, but they probably can't delete the firewall logs, and so on. So, all right. Cross-check the information. So review this. Now, the attacker may very well be causing more damage. In fact, they almost certainly are. When there's an incident, that means they're in your network doing stuff, and they're probably still doing stuff. So test a detection method. Make sure you have a detection that works to see if it's part of the incident. This is the indicator of compromise. And then so here's what you're deciding. Will I answer a question? Be quick. Am I following the evidence? And have I guessed at the answer and got stuck on a single theory? This is a very common mistake. You don't want to go anywhere except where the evidence leads you. So are you using multiple independent sources? Are you staying objective? Have you found the earliest and most recent evidence of compromise? And have you discovered something that requires immediate remediation? Like they might be on your server stealing credit card numbers right now, in which case stopping that is more important than your investigation for a while, that sort of thing. There was a case that Mandiant did and wrote about where they found that was happening. They were stealing credit card numbers, and yet they didn't want to trigger the bad guy to know that they were onto them, so they added software that corrupted the credit card numbers. So the process continued, but the numbers were no longer any good, figuring they wouldn't notice that right away, and therefore we had more time to investigate without tripping them off, but we're also protecting the data. So that's pretty cool. So here's some scenarios. So a large online retailer, and customers are complaining that after they sign up, they start getting spam email. Now, of course, this happens all the time, but that's because they actually sell your name to spammers. Like if you ever donate to a political campaign, which I have done, then you're going to get 20 texts a day for the rest of your life begging for money. It's very annoying, but there's no mystery why that happens. They sell your address to spammers for money. But so in this case, they apparently aren't doing that, or they wouldn't be an investigation. So you have customers complaining, but that doesn't really prove anything. They might have signed up somewhere else too. So work with customers, review their email, and then it's better if you can reproduce this. So create fake customer accounts and see if those receive email. Then you're in control of the process. So use long random usernames, because there are some spammers that just try to guess usernames, like common names. But if you have long random numbers, they're not going to guess that. So these would be accounts that would only get email if somebody did steal the email address somewhere in your process. And so there's various places customer data goes. There's an internal database, and there's an external database at a third-party marketing firm. That's where the customer's emails are. So apparently it must be stolen in one of those places. And so the database is a commercial product with a huge database, and it's got a lot of traffic and a lot of records, and it's updated directly on the company website or manually by people that call into customer service to update things. So that's how the data gets in. There's no other way of updating the records, and there are backups on-site and off-site. And the marketing firm gets data every month. So all these are places where your data went. By the way, I should mention, this is a fundamental issue in all computer security. If you can usually stump anybody if you ask them, what is the most important data you have? And then you say, okay, where is it? How many copies are, and where are they? And there was a survey about 8 years ago where they found that the average tech executive owned 20 USB drives and had lost 15 of them. And so the question is it in your home system? Is it on a USB? Is it in your Gmail? Is it in your Dropbox? How many copies of this thing are there, and where are they? It's not surprising that they get stolen all the time, because usually the answer is it's just everywhere, all over the place, and we're not controlling or monitoring that, which is not good, of course. So it's unlikely that the marketing firm is a source, because the customers say they get their spam quickly. You don't have to wait till the end of the month. So that would seem like the marketing firm is not the source of the loss. If people are calling in on the phone, it's very unlikely that they're stealing that data by intercepting the audio. That's extremely inefficient, and you only get one at a time, whereas stealing the whole file somewhere is much more effective. The volume of network traffic is high. A network packet capture would be very difficult. It's probably encrypted anyway. What's much better is to do query monitoring, where you can monitor what queries go to the database. That is something every database has. And then you don't record all the data, you just record what queries have been run. And that's a more reasonable list of data, like a log file. So here's some theories. It might be an insider stealing the stuff and handing out. That could be, but there's no easy way to test that. I've seen videos where they have like Indian call centers where you call in and make a purchase. They outsource it to India, and somebody's there helping you buy shoes or something, and they're also just writing down the credit card numbers and then selling them to a broker after work. That could be happening. And how would you know, and how would you prove it? So the other thing, you might have code on your website to capture email addresses. This happens all the time. There's a product called Magento that is used to be a payment service on many websites, and it keeps on getting hacked. They inject extra code to Magento so it gets an extra copy of your credit card number and sends it off to someone else. This happens all the time. So you can test this by entering some fake accounts directly in the database, bypassing the web form. So if it's being stolen from the website, then these accounts will not get spam mail. Also, somebody might be copying your backup tapes, so add some different fake accounts to the backups. This is what they call a barium meal in espionage circles. If you think there's a spy in your network, like this happened, some famous musician or something had a baby, and somebody shared her baby pics with like National Enquirer, so then she handed out different baby pics to each of her friends to see which ones went. And that's how you catch people. You give them different information and see which one leaks. So you make it through the web form. And so 3 kinds of fake accounts. Some made through the web form, some put directly in a database, and some added only to the backups. So this is a good plan. You'll find out which one of these is the leak. So spam comes to the first set, the ones made through the web form, and to the ones manually entered in the database. So that suggests the website is not the problem. It's somebody is managing to steal data from the database and not from the backups. So this is how you narrow it down. All tech support, all investigations, you find some way to split it into like 2 pieces. Like when people can't get on, it's either the server or your machine or the network connection. So you try to split the problem in half, and in half again to track down what part of it is the problem. So it could be a direct access to the database. It could be malware on the database server, or it could be somebody connecting to it over the network. So network level packet captures, like I say, you could capture network traffic, but that's very difficult, very, very expensive, very hard to do because it's encrypted. What's much more effective is to just log what queries are processed on a database server. That's just going to be a text log file with the queries. It's not going to be too huge or too hard to read. So create some more fake accounts, scan through the logs to see what is normal, and find out what queries and stored procedures are normally executed. And you notice that there is no normal process where you would export a whole bunch of email addresses all at once. Of course, that's not a normal thing you do. You log into one account and change it, one other account and change it, and so on. So a couple of weeks later, the new accounts get spam. You retrieve the query logs, and you find a query, a single query, showing someone dumped all the emails for a certain time range. So this does appear that some bad guy is in fact executing this query on your database server somehow and stealing the emails. So you know when it happened. The IP address it came from is also logged, so it came from somebody in the graphic arts department, but it used a database administrator's username. So that's already suggesting something is very wrong. And you interview them, and they say the graphics art department doesn't ever interact with customers, so you got leads. Now you have a pretty good idea what's going on. Database queries are made over the network, and all right. And you're using somebody else's account, so it sounds like somebody compromised an account, and they also compromised a machine, and the two don't match, and they're using the compromised account from the compromised machine, getting in your network. So go to the apparently infected machine, get a live response and forensic images, interview the user and find out, has they been leaving it on, is it acting strange, the usual stuff. And they go to the database server and collect live response and database logs and query logs and other logs. Now, you're not going to copy the whole hard drive because it's huge, or image the RAM because it's huge. And these are the logs that will give you a clue what's been going on. So the workstation, you find malware in the workstation, persistent malware that lets people remote control it, and it's been there for 2 years. This is pretty common. Sometime 2 years ago, they installed a game, clicked on a link, or did something, and it's been sitting there all this time. You're never going to figure out how that happened. You don't have any evidence from 2 years ago. Usually, you can't get to the bottom of it all. But usually, this is the source of it. So now the question is, how many other machines are infected? So now that you have found an infection on this one machine, find some indicators of compromise, like file names, registry keys, or something, and now scan through your network to see if they also infected other machines. You can also use firewall logs. You know what the external IP address this machine connects to. You can see if anybody else is connecting to that IP address, which would suggest they're infected by the same malware or by the same attacker. So, usual bug. All right, so here's things that could have gone wrong. After complaints for customers, you could then scan every computer in the data to see if they got copies of the email addresses. And look for large files. This would suggest somebody in your company is stealing those files, putting it on a company machine, and then moving them out, which is a strange assumption to make. So this is a large amount of effort and a low chance of success from making a foolish assumption. Another unwise path. Assume an insider is leaking the stuff out. Now, like I said, that could be happening, but it's not easy to investigate. So you get profiles, personnel files, background checks, install keyloggers and cameras everywhere. You can do all this stuff, but you're probably just going to drive yourself nuts and make everybody hate you and probably not get the answer. This leads to a witch hunt, invades the privacy. Again, a lot of effort, a lot of collateral damage, and a small chance of success. And, you have no good reason to believe it was an insider. Another unwise path, it's on the database server, so analyze the RAM from the database server to hunt for malware. And again, that's just an awful lot of data, and you're not going to find it because the malware, it turned out, was not on the database server anyway. It was on another machine. So again, you've jumped to a conclusion. This tends to happen. Go down an unwise path and waste your time on something unproductive or even harmful, like insulting all your employees by accusing them. Like, for example, right now, one thing that happens to me, I used to assign papers, then suddenly they all got perfect a year or two ago because everybody's using ChatGPT. And like English teachers, they have to assign essays. I just quit assigning essays, but English teachers assign essays, and then they have to decide if the student used ChatGPT. They tell them not to. Then how do you know? And there are tools to tell you, but they don't work. And remember, one teacher would ask ChatGPT, hey, did you write this? It'll just say yes, because he doesn't understand how it works. It's not like it has a log. It just says yes so almost randomly. So he starts accusing students of cheating and throwing them out when they didn't cheat. And I'm really reluctant to do that. That's really destructive. If you accuse students of cheating and they're not cheating, you destroy their learning. It would be better to let someone cheat and get away with it than to do that. And this happened to a Pennsylvania high school a few years ago. They had laptops for the students. They were afraid the students would steal them, so they put surveillance software on the laptops so they could tell where they were, but they could also turn on the microphone and the camera secretly. So they did that and got videos of the students like smoking pot and having sex at home. And then they contacted their parents for this misbehavior. And then everybody said, you did what? And nobody gave you permission, and there's lawsuits and disaster. And it would have been a lot better to just let people steal some of the laptops. That would have been a much smaller harm than this misguided attempt to prevent theft. Anyway, that's why you have to do risk analysis. You have to decide, What am I trying to prevent? How expensive is the prevention? What would happen if I don't do that? Anyway, so automated clearinghouse. Here's a bank, and somebody tried to steal a couple $100,000. There was a request to transfer $300,000. It was flagged by fraud prevention, and it didn't happen. But it was coming from the chief financial officer's account. He says he didn't authorize it. So here's the facts. You know the date, you know the time, you know the source IP address, which was your company's IP firewall. So apparently some machine inside the company did initiate this. So you look in the firewall, and you might want to look at the laptop machine, but maybe other computers are involved. So look at the firewall logs and see who logged in prior to that, and you find 2 customers logged in. One is a CFO's address, and the other one is not immediately recognized. So gather complete forensic evidence from CFO's machine. Now you have a reason to think it might be involved. Get everything, because evidence is being lost, and this is a high-value target. This might very well go to court, so you want to preserve all the evidence. Then find out what this other machine that logged in is. So you go to DHCP logs and find out that that other machine is just another login from the same laptop. And then now you can interview the guy and say, why did you have 2 different logins from different locations close? And he says he had a meeting. So he picked up his laptop, went from his office to a conference room, and logged into the Wi-Fi there. That's why he logged in twice from different places in a close period of time. And he said he didn't initiate the transfer and doesn't know anything about it. So here's the recap. Your firewalls tell you that the connections came from that machine. He says he didn't do it. You have firewall logs, and you have all the information about that individual machine. So theories. Maybe somebody snuck into his office and used his computer. Maybe there's undetected malware on his computer. These are logical theories. So to consider them, it turns out the office is in clear view of other people. It's an open plan. It's unlikely that anybody could walk in there without being noticed. So that's not likely. Malware is more likely. So if you analyze his machine, you find, in fact, there is a recently installed new program on his machine, and that's banking malware. So his machine is infected with malware, which is, of course, extremely common. People send you email attachments and SMSs. And so do a thorough forensic examination trying to find out how and when it was infected, and then see if other machines in your company are infected too. Now you know it's a known piece of malware, something like an antivirus tool might do to detect it, or you can use a tool like Velociraptor we'll use later. Look at firewall logs, see if other machines are connecting to the IP address this malware phones home to. That'd be another way to find if this malware or some other malware is on there being controlled by the same command and control server. Any of those could be possible. And so here's things that could have gone wrong. See, this is one that used to happen like 10 years ago all the time. There's no antivirus alert, therefore there's no malware. People used to believe this. They think antivirus is essentially perfect. Therefore, there must be a security issue at the bank, so call the bank and say, you got an unauthorized transfer coming from inside your bank, and yell at them and tell them to lock people up. And you know, you didn't validate the data. You assume that your security measures are good, and a third party can help you. And of course, they're probably just going to give you the runaround. And all that time, bad things are probably still happening. Data is being lost. Bad guys are still wandering around your network. You assumed it was somebody else's problem without having good evidence of that. So another unwise path is to say the CFO must have done it. He's a crook. So he wants you to investigate the CEO and avoid tipping him off. There are tools for this, by the way. Mandiant, if you pay for the $80,000 corporate version of Encase or FTK, it comes with a remote imaging solution that can image your whole hard drive and RAM over the network while the machine is in use covertly. For this reason, if you want to investigate somebody in your company, you would like to gather evidence from their machine without them knowing while they're at work, because if they're innocent, you don't want to insult them. So you want to gather the evidence, and if you find proof, then you can fire them and prosecute them and everything. But you want to be able to gather evidence from your suspects without letting them know there's under suspects. And that just can be done. However, in this case, no security measures are perfect. This is the thing to know. And point out, in general, if you're going to be investigating an insider, you need an actual detective. This is no longer really a computer investigation. This is a human investigation, and probably not something the average incident response person is ready for. Anyway, so an example of things that can go wrong. Let's try a Kahoot. Here it is. A lot of people watch TV shows and then they try to get involved in serious investigation. And, you usually want to leave it to professionals. know your limitations. That's part of the CISSP ethics thing. You have to know your limitations and not pretend to perform services which you're not competent to do. It's a very common error, ethics error made in the business. Take a look at the Twitch. Yeah, we got 5 people, so there may be some people who want to play. All right. And I hope you can see it. Let me just take another look. Not streaming? Well, we see, remember, not streaming? I am streaming and recording, okay. All right. I just wanted to see if the Kahoot number is visible. 566-718. Somehow I'm having trouble verifying that. Check the Twitch chat. We are not looking at the slides. Yeah, it looks like something's wrong. Thank you for telling me, folks. Let me stop and restart the stream. Could not access the channel. All right.